Hi, I would like to talk to you a little bit about the possibility of passion being the universal voice. And in order to do that, let's first talk a little bit about the universe. The universe is populated with hundreds of thousands of galaxies, hundreds of billions of galaxies. Galaxies not entirely unlike this one. In a galaxy the size of the Milky Way galaxy, there's an estimated 200 to 400 billion solar systems. Solar systems that are not entirely unlike this one. In our solar system, we have a fairly common yellow star, and inside of our yellow star, there is a whole bunch of hydrogen. Hydrogen is the lightest element, it's the most abundant element. It has the atomic number 1, and that means that it has one positively charged proton in the nucleus and one negatively charged electron. Inside of our sun, there's a tremendous amount of hydrogen, and it goes careening around at unprecedented rates, and occasionally, or quite frequently actually, it collides into other hydrogen. When this happens, the nuclei combine, forming helium, which is number 2 on the atomic scale. And there's also some energy that's released during that process, and that's fusion. That energy is released in the form of heat and light, and that's what we feel from our sun. That's why we have the warmth and light that we have from our sun. In a star that has a large enough mass, this process will continue until there's a tremendous amount of helium, and then helium will begin to have fusion. And it'll create heavier elements, such as carbon. Carbon is number 6 on the atomic scale, meaning it has 6 protons and 6 electrons. It also has 6 neutrons in the nucleus, but for this discussion, we're just going to focus on protons and electrons. Carbon is interesting to us because it's the basis for all life on Earth. This process will continue creating heavier elements such as oxygen and so on until we hit iron. Now, iron is unique because the nuclei are more tightly bound, and it's the last element in which fusion releases energy. So even if iron was to have fusion to create heavier elements, we would no longer receive the light and the heat that we get from our sun. So once a significant portion of the star's core is iron, then it begins to collapse in on itself. The gravitational pull of the iron pulls all of the iron atoms in on itself, and this creates a rather unstable situation. In about a second, the core will collapse in on itself and then not be able to sustain the unstable conditions, and the core will explode. When that happens, the iron goes smashing into other elements that are still lighter elements on the edge of the star, and it creates still heavier elements. Now this wide variety of elements goes spilling out into the universe for hundreds of thousands of light years. And eventually, like elements coalesce, and sometimes they form planets. Planets kind of like this one. And if the conditions are right, so far our admittedly somewhat limited view of the right conditions is that you have to have a significant portion of water coupled with the right proximity from the sun, and there's a little bit of electricity or lightning in there, and creates the building blocks for amoebas. Little happy amoebas, apparently. So sometimes these amoebas get this great idea, and they think, I know, let's crawl our way out of the ocean. And they start to evolve into something that will eventually make its way out of the ocean, and once they've started the process of evolution, why bother to stop? Sometimes they'll carry on to evolve into all sorts of things like, I don't know, some squid-faced bipeds or maybe humans. So what this means is that you and I and your best friend, and your mother are all quite literally stardust. This is fascinating. Let's go look at the universe that we came from. Let's look at this galaxy and into something that might be a little bit more familiar. Our pretty blue planet. Oh look, there's us. Hi us. We love ourselves. Self-love. That's great. Let's go somewhere else on our pretty blue planet for a minute and talk about this chick. Let's talk about her and her gigantic heart. If we were to have a look inside of her gigantic heart, we would find it populated with cells. On a completely different topic, let's talk about cells for a moment. The Earth is teeming with cells. There's 100 trillion cells just in your body. They perform thousands of functions, they come in all shapes and sizes, and they work together to form all living tissue. We've set a certain standard for what we consider being alive. By the criteria that we've created, cells definitely meet our standard. That criteria is specific things like growth, the ability to metabolize, the ability to reproduce, etc. Since cells definitely meet that criteria, one could argue possibly that they might be sentient. At least I'll say that they seemingly are unaware that their motivations are crucial to the survival of another force, namely us. They seem to maneuver around with their own directive, and yet their directive is essential for my survival. So I'd like to draw an unusual conclusion. I'm going to make the parallel that similarly, we're small autonomous sections of the universe, in that same way that cells are small autonomous sections of my body. Now, what if the universe needed us to fulfill functions that we're unaware of, in that same way that I need cells to fulfill specific functions that, to my knowledge, they seem unaware of as well? How would the universe ever communicate that to us? I'm going to propose the idea that it's through passion, through that feeling, that thing that you just have to do and you don't really know why, but you're completely inexplicably drawn to it. For some reason, that thing creates your bliss. We've all had that feeling of passion, and so I would like to encourage you to follow your bliss because it may be your universal role.